I had entered the beginning of the end. My body had reached a point where it just stopped. Not all at once, but in ways I didn't understand at the time. I had pushed myself past my limits for so long, mentally, physically, and emotionally, that there was nothing left to run on. My body was in the severe phase of burnout, where my mind and body had hit a hard stop because the chronic stress and burnout had finally completely depleted me. But the scary part is, I was so deep in survival mode that I had no idea how severely unwell I was becoming. When I first got sick, I didn't think anything of it. It was that time of year, everyone was ill. I thought it would pass in a couple of weeks tops, but it only got worse, much worse, until 6 months later, I was so severely ill I could barely function. By this point, I hadn't slept properly in 4 months. For most of those 4 months, I couldn't sleep more than 20 minutes at a time. For the last 6 weeks, I slept on the settee because I found I could sleep longer sitting up. So I was able to stretch my sleeps to about 40 minutes. The problem was it was 40 minutes of sleep and then anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes awake. So there was no feeling rested in the morning after a night like that. I was given sleeping tablets, stronger and stronger doses, until I was kept out at the highest dose and nothing worked. My body was in constant pain. My joints, my muscles. I had a sharp throbbing pain in my neck, both shoulders, and down my right arm into my back. I had numbness in my arm. I had an itchy rash all over my body, constant and quite heavy heart palpitations. I had headaches throughout the day. It was just a laundry list of things that was wrong with me. And I kept coming up with what I thought were logical reasons for each issue that I had. I was coming up with anything but what it actually was. Stress, burnout, and survival mode just wasn't factoring in as a possibility because although I knew stress could manifest physically, I'd been there before for other reasons. I just didn't realize that this level of stress could lead to all the physical manifestations that I was experiencing. My cough was getting so bad and so constant that I could barely breathe. I had a sore throat that hadn't gone away for months, and a nose so bunged up I could only breathe through my mouth for months. And still, I didn't connect it to stress or burnout or the job. And, I guess why would I? So many people don't make that connection. It wasn't until I ended up in the hospital for the third time, convinced I was having a heart attack, that everything changed. I remember telling the doctor that I was falling asleep with my eyes open, something that, I didn't even think that was possible. I told him it happened once while I was driving and I had to be woken up when the car started drifting. And to be clear, I stopped driving after that incident. That's when he told me I was having what were called micro sleeps. Because I was so severely deprived, my brain was forcing itself to shut down, even while I looked awake, in order to prevent long-term damage. The hospital doctor then said to me my body was shutting down from extreme stress, exhaustion, and burnout. And if something didn't change immediately, then chances were high that I wasn't going to make it through the year. The following day I had a meeting at work and I asked to scale things back to something more sustainable, something, more human. And I was told if I couldn't manage it, then they could very quickly find someone who could. And that was the moment everything clicked because that's what all the loyalty, the long hours, the overworking actually meant. Nothing. In that environment, people aren't people. We're output. We're replaceable. And I wasn't the exception. I really believed that if I gave enough, I'd get that same loyalty back. And I was wrong. At that point, I had two choices. It was my job or my health, or really my life. So I packed up my office and by midday I was home. And I remember just sitting there when I got home, just in complete disbelief. I had medical proof and I had explained everything, and still there was a complete disregard for my health, for my well-being, for my life. They were willing to risk all that for my output. I simply didn't care. I felt relief, but not just relief. I was angry, I was sad, I was confused, I was in disbelief, disillusioned by everything. What did my whole life mean? All those years of schooling, working my way up, everything I was taught to believe, everything I did believe. What did this all mean? What was the point? Working so hard for what? At that point, none of it made any sense, and I didn't really know how to process any of it. I don't remember much more about that afternoon or that night. I know I was exhausted. I don't think I made it past 9 o'clock that night, but I remember the next morning. At first I didn't realize it. It took about an hour after waking to realize I had just slept through the night. After 4 months of barely sleeping at all, I had my first full night's sleep, fully rested, and then I started noticing everything else. The pain in my shoulders, my back, my neck, down my arm and down into my back, gone. The cough, the sore throat, the bunged up nose, gone. The headaches, the itchy skin, the heavy heart palpitations, gone. Even things I had stopped questioning, the anxiety in my body, the constant tension, the edge I was on, the pit in my stomach, all gone. At this point, I was trying to wrap my head around it all. It felt completely surreal to wake up feeling even better than when I first got sick 6 months earlier. That all of it, everything I had been living with for half a year, could just disappear the moment the job was gone. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't just being run down. My body had been in survival mode for so long that I didn't even recognize what normal felt like anymore. And I know now I'm not the only one living like that. A lot of people are, and there's many, unfortunately, that don't realize it until it's too late. And I was very close to being one of those people who nearly ended up in an early grave. And that was the moment I knew I wasn't just done with that job. I was done living like that entirely. I was done with corporate and any job that was going to demand more than what's humanly reasonable. It was a loud and clear wake-up call that I just couldn't ignore anymore. But walking away from that job, that life, didn't instantly fix everything. Because when you've spent that long in survival mode, it doesn't just switch off overnight. Yeah, the physical symptoms disappeared, but I could feel how close I still was to tipping right back over the edge. In many ways, I still am. So I'm having to learn slowly how to live differently, how to rest without guilt, how to exist without constantly pushing myself to the edge. And that's something I'm still learning. How to deprogram myself, live differently, respond differently, how to heal and face things head on, how to embrace a slower, more intentional life when I've just not been programmed for that. I just started questioning everything, my priorities, the way I'd been living, what I placed my values on, the expectations I had of myself, and the ones I'd been carrying from everyone else. And even after all this, there was still this pressure to keep going, to keep proving, to keep pushing, even when I knew what the cost was. So I had to really stop and ask myself, what do I actually want my life to look and feel like, and how can I make that happen? I was being hit with some big realizations, and that's when everything started to change, because walking away was just the beginning. Learning how to actually live differently and carry it out was something else entirely. And that's what I'll talk about in the next video. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.